Chaz Bear, or known by his stage name Toro and even Les Sins, is known as a pioneer of the chillwave genre that was popular in the late 2000s. However though, this label is honestly disingenuous and not exactly exemplary of his musical career, as you'll see later in the video. But who is he? Chaz Bear was born on November 7th, 1986 in Columbia, South Carolina, and he started Toro at the age of 15. He first made music on a cassette tape mixer. He attended college at the University of South Carolina and obtained a degree in graphic design, which is especially prominent in his album covers, as well as Company Studio, which he founded in 2016. While in college though, he began to experiment with Fruity Loops/FL Studio that he got from a friend. From there, he began using it to learn sampling and programming, albeit transitioning to Reason prior to the release of his first album. Speaking of his first album, after signing with Car Park Records in 2009, Bear's first album, Causers of This, released on January 4th, 2010. This album was known as being a hallmark of the chillwave genre with its heavy use of samples, reverb synths, as well as its slow, relaxed tempos. Lyrically, Bear claims that this album was really personal and that it was his breakup album. Pretty much every song on his record was amazing. However, highlights include Blessa, Thanks Vision, You Hid, and Low Shoulder. However, turning away from this faux genre in 2011, Bear released Underneath the Pine, which was a complete 180 from Causers, being more psychedelia focused. This album was also more so based on live instrumentation rather than being digitally produced. In terms of lyrics, Bear switches it up by stating that this album was not really about girls, but more about his friends and family. Not to show my biases, but this is one of his more overrated albums. However, some highlights include Still Sound and New Beat. 2 years later in 2013, he released Anything in Return, which is known as his breakthrough album. This album, as Bear claims, is a combination of his first two albums, but this time wrapped up as not only an electronic dance, but also pop and R&B album. Claiming influences from pop stars like Rihanna, albeit being disillusioned with her lyrics, the subject matter of the record was something that, quote, I can relate to. Lyrically, though, he takes a more confident stance, which is quite a contrast from his earlier albums. Let's take a listen to a song from one of his early albums versus this album.
When can we get together again? Never mind, I've lost you. I wanna make you want me. Won't you take it in? Don't try to look in my eyes at the light.
Once again, letting my biases show. I'd argue that this album is his absolute magnum opus. There are no highlights because every single song on this record is a highlight in of itself. Bear has always had a tendency to switch up his sound every single record. This is exemplified with 2015's What For. Sonically, this was a significant departure from his earlier albums as it was an indie rock album with elements of 70s and pop rock. The goal of this album, as Bear quotes, was just to have fun with it, not overthink it. Despite being a fun and relatively carefree record, this album was met with fairly mixed reception. Highlights include The Flight, Buffalo, Half Dome, and Lily. Continuing the trend of switching up its sound, 2017's release of Boo Boo is yet another 180 towards electronic production. Bear cites this album as a coming-of-age record, and he mentions Travis Scott and Daft Punk as some of his influences. This was also the first album since his LASIK eye surgery, which definitely marks the transition away from glasses as being a hallmark of his identity. Highlights include Mirage, Girl Like You, and You and I. For what seems like the one and only continuity in his records, Outer Peace, released 2 years later, continues his electronic production, albeit this time with more hip-hop influences like New House or 50/50. Lyrically, Bear dedicates this album to people who are into making stuff. This record features highlights like Ordinary Pleasure, Fading, and Freelance. And once again in 2022, he switches it up for a psychedelic sound reminiscent of Underneath the Pine with his funk/rock record Mahal, which means love or expensive in Tagalog. This album is distinguished by his infusion of his personal life, embracing of his Filipino culture, as well as having a really lo-fi jam session type of sound. I actually love this album, so it's hard to pick favorites, but The Loop, Days in Love, and Way Too Hot are definitely top picks. Last but not least, in 2024, Bear fully dabbles into hip-hop, pop-punk, and emo with his latest record, Whole Earth. In regards to this album, Bear states that he wanted to make something that was, quote, a little more amplified and have an angstier sort of lens. Furthermore, Whole Earth is Toro's album with the most features in it, featuring contributions by Don Toliver, Duckworth, and many more. Walking in the Rain and Tuesday are record's highlights. There's also an acoustic version of this album called Unearth. Very clever. While Tori Moa may have had humble beginnings in chillwave, has now expanded multiple genres. Within the span of 16 years, he went from the aforementioned chillwave to psychedelia, pop/R&B, indie rock, synth pop, funk, and now trap. It's inspiring to see how this humble graphic designer hailing from South Carolina has been lifted into musical stardom, being the pioneer of the once so infamous chillwave scene. That wraps up this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you want more content like this, feel free to like and subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one.